I'd like to introduce you to the lovely Dr. Tracy Marks. And here's some things that she's had to say about trauma. As you know, the self-help approach of the mystic, the goal is a little different. It's achieving greater self-awareness and and a deeper integration of love, sense of love into your life. It's a common thing with the mystics that love is central and that it's more important than religion. And many people are now claiming to be spiritual but not religious. That is essentially a kind of mystic path if you aim toward self-realization. But let's listen to the lovely Tracy Marks talking about her approach to trauma in the practices that I teach. It's about connecting to a greater sense of love. This does involve some sense of control in relationship to your feelings and an inability to express your feelings without overwhelmed and to be at play with your feelings and so forth. That is the mindfulness aspect of inner artist mindfulness. The inner artist, which is the you, so that's very mysterious in a way. And your true self, your super soul, or super self. And for those who are inclined to be more objective, would say that that's the brain. So there's a lot of overlap between the practices of the mystic path as I present them and healing, damage, faith, and love, and the things that a professional therapist can offer to you. In fact, the two can be quite harmonious. So, further ado, I have us listen a little bit to Tracy has to say. I will interject a few comments and not to steal her thunder, and to limit how much share and provide in my video a connection to her channel where you can learn more. So here goes.
Trauma isn't just a bad memory that we can choose to forget or a wound that heals naturally over time. It's much more complex than that, affecting both the mind and the body in profound ways. I'm Dr. Tracy Marks, a psychiatrist, and I make mental health education videos. Today, I want to talk about why trauma isn't just something you can just get over and why understanding the science behind it is essential for healing. When we talk about trauma, we're not just talking about the event itself, but the lingering impact that it has on your brain and body. To understand why trauma is so hard to get over, we first need to look at what happens in the brain and body when we experience something traumatic. Trauma is a complex psychological and physiological response to experiences that overwhelm a person's capacity to cope. It's often associated with a single life threatening event like accidents or assaults, but trauma.
So, I'm going to stop here for a minute and point out what she's saying here is true. That it isn't something, damage faith and love, which is my focus and my approaches, my mystic approaches, self-realization approaches. Where we agree and overlap a lot is on the objective view that your higher self, your Paramatma, is actually your brain. And there may be more to that. We do not. It's hard to have evidence for that, but there's a lot of things that point to it being more. But you don't just get over things. You have to have a good connection. She's going to talk about that later in her video. And I encourage you to see her video here. I'll provide a link to it. This is a connection to your body. She talks about connecting to the body and bodily awareness. And I said, I think a sense of control is very important here. I teach that it is helplessness or damaged faith and love that causes us to experience a blockage of real needs and the ability to get them met, which I say is at the core of trauma and damaged faith and love. And it's that's where we agree is the importance of the brain and also trying to understand the brain. So this is a harmony here, and a professional therapist can be very helpful to someone. But how does the mystic path provide a kind of self-help in terms of dealing with faith and love? Well, it's an unlearning of helplessness. And she talks about being, later in the video, about being in connection with your body. And she mentions mindfulness, and mindfulness is part of the practice that I talk about. I also include self-talk, which is a kind of healing way of giving yourself a sense of love and safety in relationship to your feelings and your needs. And increases your ability to connect to real needs. Now, he doesn't mention this, but when in this video, but when you have damaged faith and love, to the point that you felt so helpless, then to a certain degree, that you've lost control over the situation. The need itself becomes painful. And this we get from Arthur Janow, the great Arthur Janow, where pain is recognized as a result of helplessness around needs and feelings, their ability to be expressed, and so on. It's a kind of intense anxiety pain. And that pain, that anxiety pain, is so great that people try to cope with it and regain a sense of control. But they don't do this themselves. This is part of the reason why you don't just move on from drama the way she's talking about. The reason for it is that you don't know what their feelings and needs were back then. You haven't felt them and processed them, because there was no control over the situation. And the needs themselves become painful, so painful that a separation from them is necessary, but yet that need keeps pushing in your mind. It's a primal force. And this push toward that original need is felt as painful now. So the brain jumps in to protect you by giving you an artificial sense of control, which does help in the beginning. But it hurts you later on. It's a symbolic kind of distanced symbolic form of the need is created by the brain. Real slow now. The need has become painful because of helplessness to get it met. That could have meant to get away, to run, to whatever the need was in that damaged faith. And so, this becomes something you need to distance yourself from. And the brain does it. It's not a conscious thing. So it isn't undone by just a conscious attempt to reverse it, because it was never really fully conscious. Because there was no, the need became painful. And there was a need for distance, a kind of hope dope, where something symbolic, distanced from, but symbolic of the original need, is sought after. And this is also the source of greed and power mongering, because you've lost control, so you want power, so you look for symbolic power. That symbolic power can be a sickness, and the symbolic greed, well, you can't fulfill greed. You can't fulfill a symbol of the original need. And now Jesus speaks to this by saying several things. Unless you take up your cross and follow after me, you're not worthy of me. You have to feel that pain, but you have to feel it in a safe way. And then he says that the love of money or symbolic need is the root of all evil. So virtue is damaged by greed, by this distance from real need, the ability to feel bad and also to offer that sort of need to another person is damaged. So the love flow is damaged. And so that symbolic covering, which, she hasn't really mentioned here, this is a problem spiritually, which is the approach of inner artist mindfulness, is to help heal you spiritually. That means to help you have the virtues which help you to receive and to give love. To receive needs, real needs, and feel satisfied, and also provide those needs to other people. And your virtues are connected to that, and I'll get to that in other videos. Here's a big difference. This approach that I'm talking about, it's aimed at spiritual healing, but it also has an impact on trauma. Because trauma, or damaged faith and love, means a disconnect between yourself and your real needs. And that harms your ability to love and be loved in real ways. And pain-killing kinds of activities, like, the symbolic need, feels good. It feels like a relief. And but it's addictive. And it's a problem for your spiritual health, the giving and receiving of love. Now that's something that Arthur Janoff understood. Great psychologist Arthur Janoff, in his process called primal therapy, where he understood this and also predicted that it would have that unresolved trauma. And he basically emphasized and talked more about CPTSD, which is developmental complex, developmental trauma in childhood. But he talked about how this impacts later health, physical health. And they're only now discovering, but never giving credit to Arthur Janoff. They're now discovering through ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, that there's a correlation between adverse childhood experiences, damaged faith and love, and later health outcomes and vulnerabilities. Dr. Janoff further said that it impacted the immune system. So you need to get trauma therapy. Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea, would it? And if you can get a professional to help you with your trauma, then that's so good. But what can you do on your own in the path of spiritual healing that will also help? And that's what this channel will teach you about. And hopefully you will learn. So let's hear a little bit more from Tracy.
Trauma can also result from prolonged exposure to chronic stressors, such as abuse, neglect, or systemic oppression. Psychologically, trauma occurs when an event or a series of events profoundly impacts a person's sense of safety, identity, and worldview. It's important to note that trauma is subjective. What's traumatic for one person may not be for another, depending on factors like personal history, support systems, and neurobiological resilience. I talk more about how to build up your resilience in another video that I'll have linked in this video. When you experience trauma, several key areas of your brain are impacted. The amygdala, often referred to as the brain's fear center, becomes
But you gotta understand, she's talking about what is traumatic for one is not traumatic for another. It's this threshold of the intensity of helplessness. If there's not a lot of helplessness involved in an experience, well, then it's not as traumatic. But also, and that means the condition, the circumstances of the individual that's going through this damaged phase. You have people who treat you very badly outside, but you have very supportive parents. That's going to make a very big difference in your resiliency that she's talking about. But also something that they found, and never giving credit to Arthur Janoff, but Arthur Janoff also said that later that there's a thing called compounding. Now, they're finding this now because they're saying, the report's saying that CPTSD, trauma in childhood, makes it more likely that the person will be traumatically impacted by war when they go to war. That they will get PTSD more easily because they're more vulnerable. But, don't understand that the thing that happened to the person in warfare wasn't traumatic or damaging in any way for everybody. It's just that some people are going to be more resilient. It's going to be less impacted because if they didn't lose enough sense of control in the situation or transcendence to the situation, it's going to be more traumatic for that person than someone who didn't remember compounding. The early traumas become compounded by later traumas. Now, those later traumas are going to be more intense for a person who's already had trauma. And also, there are different particular traumatic events that something more symbolic of that trauma, a new real trauma that is symbolic of that first trauma, is going to be more impacted. And that's, the nature of the particular effect, person, the particular traumatic experience of that person. A person who experienced a great deal of coldness in their emotional life from their parents is going to be much more vulnerable to that kind of coldness from other people later in life. So, I'm, yeah. What I'm going to do is, let's listen to her a little bit more, but I thought I needed to check that.
Hyperactive. This heightened state of alertness is why trauma survivors often feel anxious or on edge even when there's no immediate danger. The amygdala remains in a constant state of vigilance, scanning for potential threats and making it hard to relax or feel safe. Your hippocampus, which is central to forming and retrieving memories, can actually shrink in response to trauma. And this structural change affects how memories are stored and recalled, which is why people with trauma often experience fragmented, distorted, or intrusive memories of the event. And traumatic memories don't get processed the same way that other memories do. Instead, they get stuck and resurface as vivid flashbacks or nightmares.
Does zero trust make zero sense? In this ebook, we break down the security concept so that you can better identify.
Then there's the prefrontal cortex, which is normally responsible for rational thinking, decision making, and impulse control. Trauma survivors have reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, making it difficult to regulate emotions, concentrate, or make decisions, especially.
Oh boy, that's a lot to unpack. Here she's talking about self-control. People can lose some self-control if they've experienced a lot of painful helplessness. And that lack of self-control can be manifest in a person's, in some people, it's a constant anxiety. And guess what? This impacts politics. Yes, it does. The anxious voter whose focus, and you tend, if you're in pain, you're a more selfish person, overall, If there's some people who just are overwhelmed by other people's, and hypersensitive to other people's feelings, because that's how they cope with the lack of empathy given to them. That happens. But that's part of their particular painful helplessness experience. The people are different. It's very important to be, if you're going to vote, that you be empathetic, not only to yourself, but to others. You need both. You can be overly empathetic with others because of trauma, or underly empathetic with others. But in all those cases, both of those cases, you're not that empathetic with yourself. You're unable to be in connection with your real needs. So your self-concern is that you avoid those feelings of painful anxiety, helplessness, and okay. So what she's talking about here also overlaps into emotional intelligence. Okay, let's go back to the voting again. Conspiracy theories. People who believe in conspiracy theories, like, oh, something out there is coming to get me, this is the thing that she's talking about, the person in constant anxiety like that, who have a very low threshold to dealing with anything that upsets them. And some people, if they're into their symbolic need instead of their real needs, which can be satisfied, they can feel in pain from someone who challenges their power mongering, or they get angry and afraid when those things are challenged. They can also be hyper punishing and very tribalistic because of trauma. And this increased tribalism, which is somewhat of a natural thing, but the extreme versions of this impact our inability to accept people who are different than ourselves and have empathy for them. And that's kind of this, prejudices like that can be very cruel, where you see other people, not quite as people. And power mongers and people that politically, they're power mongers and given over to greed, the love of symbolic need or money. These folks can end up with a lot of money and power, and that becomes a threat to democracy. So this is how all of this stuff also affects politics. And in my other channel, Intermind Communication, I talk about that more primarily. But I hope this has been somewhat interesting for you. There will be more, and more things to be said. And I look forward to your views, and that you can put in the comments, and your experiences with self-realization, trauma therapy, trauma therapist. Share how that's going. Please do so. And perhaps you have insights in politics yourself. Too. So I'd like to invite you also to subscribe to the channel so that helps a lot. Gets the message, helps get the message out. And also to not just comment and subscribe, but to share the video if you find it useful. And please share the videos of Dr. Tracy Marks. And again, I'm going to leave a link to that in the description of this video. Remember, you're not just in a world of wonder. Until next time.